Looks like we're live. Maybe a few minutes late to the party, but that's okay because it's our party. I have with me the shadowy and nefarious Dr. Fred Blum. Just kidding, man. Well, shadowy, but not nefarious. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for contributing to this. This has been really well received, and it took off. It's a miracle you got in when you did. It's just blowing my mind. I'm probably booked out 2 months already.
Wow.
Yeah, and that happened within like the first 2 days. So you jumped at the right time, and here you are. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Fred Blum, tell us what you do, man. Tell us what you're about.
Yeah, and thanks, Manny, for setting this up and for making this available to people. I think that's an amazing service that, this time, that one of the amazing things that maybe can come out of these crazy times is that we're all coming together to support each other. Anyway, and so that's sort of what I do for people is I call myself a coach. It's a very generic title because I work in kind of a unique way. Mm-hmm. Mainly I work with high performance, right? Executives, some big name pro athletes, people like that who essentially people who reach a high level of success. So they got everything they're supposed to want, right? They got the money, the power, the fame, the women, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And suddenly they look around and they say, wait a second, this is it? I thought by now I'd be happy, right? Because this is what they told me was supposed to make me happy.
Right.
And the reality, which we can get into, as we go on, is that stuff, the outside world, can never make us happy because that is not what happiness truly is. And so what I do is I show people, I point them really back to the source of happiness and peace and clarity and authenticity and freedom. Yeah. That is already who we are.
So, you're not alone in your niche, right? In your field. There are certainly a number of talented people who do something akin to what you do. But what's coming up for me today, what I really want to talk about today is your take, and I hope this will be helpful and it won't sound sort of self-indulgent. Your take on, so you work with these people, these high performers who nobody gets to be a high performer by accident.
Right.
Right. I mean, nobody. It is, right. It is the picture of sacrifice and discipline, right? Especially with athletes, right? I mean, they can't even stay world-class athletes past a certain age because their body just won't keep up.
Right.
So I guess and I'm always fascinated by these, and I perhaps not work with, but cross paths with a large number of people who work with high performers, elite performers. And I'm always surprised to hear that consistently people like you who give this kind of service to high performers say that they thought it would make them happy. I come from the whole happiness and success thing a little backwards. I really do. Which means that in my case, I have a sort of one of those lives that you hear about where the first, my struggle period was decades long. And I'm not looking for any sympathy here or anything like that. But it's true. It's true. And by the way, to your point, that struggle was virtually all internal. Right. I didn't know it until I knew it. It's like one of those, you know what I'm saying? You're sort of chuckling. I think you know what I mean. It's one of those things where it's like you do all this work and you claw your way to this point only to look back and realize I could have flipped a switch and everything could have been okay the whole time. Right. But you can't flip that switch until you get to that point.
Yeah. And there's an interesting element of that, which is I don't think we even get to control the timing.
No, I don't think so either.
Right. So sometimes the switch flips.
Yeah.
Whenever it flips,
Yeah. And it's just one of those little sort of poetic little sort of idiosyncrasies of life that, you know what I mean? That it's like, oh, I could have just, oh, there's shortcuts right there, but you only see it from one direction.
But you only see it when you see it.
But the thing about the happiness piece is I only found any kind of real, I don't even know how to define real success. For me, real success has a component of emotional peace and happiness. So let's say that I have real success now. Let's use whatever I have now as a benchmark. I only had this in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
So that means well over 40 years of just like staying positive and being generally a happy person, but by most outside measures, having a fucking difficult life,
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at these people who have been primed for high performance and just worked hard and focused all their lives. And I always make the assumption that if you're doing that, there must be happiness in there for you. But maybe that's not the case. That was a long way of asking that question.
Yeah, right. It's your point. And I would agree. Maybe that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
It's really a good news, bad news, or maybe a bad news, good news thing. Because, the bad news is everything that you're doing, all the energy and the time and the money, and believe me, okay, I'm the guy, I was like the personal development
guy.
I have read all the books.
Okay. Yeah.
I've been to the seminars. I've been to the mountaintop. You know what I'm saying?
You got the T-shirt.
Oh, I got lots of T-shirts, and I have spent them. I mean, probably $100,000. And one day I had to look and say, wait a second, what is going on here? Sure they would. It's like there's tips and there's tricks, but at the end of the day, I'm still not that happy. I feel like still every morning I wake up with that same tension in my system, Yeah. And it's just like, so that's the bad news, right? The bad news is for folks out there who might still be in that loop.
Yeah.
It ain't going to work. Okay. It's not going to work. The good news is that you can call off the search because, and this is a statement that's it's found in almost every spiritual tradition in one form or another. The good news, essentially, what it says is you are already that which you have been seeking. So
can I, before you go into another meaningful point, which I want to pull this apart, can we do that?
Of course.
Okay. First of all, the tension in the system really, really catches for me.
Mm-hmm.
I really get that. And so maybe for you folks listening, it's nice to make a distinction, because you can be having a positive mindset. You can be having trained yourself to learn lessons from life. And you can, all these things that are sort of like baked into personal development, right?
Oh, yeah.
And where personal development tends to say, rather than say, it tends to conflate, because it doesn't come right out and say it, right? It tends to conflate that if you have these mechanical pieces in place, such as the ability to look for the good in this, all these things,
right,
that it equates to the happiness/success axis or whatever.
Yeah.
But the tension in the system is what I really loved, because I was there. I'm very, very good at finding the positive in situations. I'm very good at all those things. And I still had the fucking tension in the system, man. I still had the little like strain in the gut, the little rubber band being stretched. That's a great way to put it. And do you think that there's a sense that we, analogically speaking, that we can't see the vista because we're looking at the windshield? Do you know what I mean by that? It's like you're looking out the window, but you're focusing on the windshield itself, right, so you're missing the Grand Canyon around you.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Except I would just add to that in this case, the vista's in here.
Right. Yeah. It's internal.
No, it's all good. I mean, it's the moment we're looking out, we've already missed the point.
Yeah. Totally get it.
And so, my premise has always been, like in my work with clients or when I teach seminars, whatnot, there's essentially two phases. I'm trying to wear my fingers.
Yeah, they're mirror image from what you're thinking.
Right. So phase one is what we're talking about here and what we'll get more into, I'm sure, which is what I call finding your true nature, or really waking up to your true nature, because there's nowhere to find. It's like you can't get any closer than you. So there's nowhere to look except who you already are.
Yeah.
But finding that, uncovering that, seeing the difference between this thing we call true nature, whose very essence is peace, love, clarity, happiness, authenticity, and freedom.
Yeah.
This is who we are. Okay. There's no work. There's no book that you have to read. It's already who we are at our core. Right. But then there's this thing that we create called an ego.
Yeah.
And the ego is who we think we are.
Yeah.
It's the identity we've been building. And I don't want to get into the whole psychology of why we build an ego, which is basically a defense mechanism, right?
Right. Yeah.
That is an overlay that we put in front of ourselves.
Yeah. It's a very sophisticated shell that we build up over time.
Very sophisticated and highly conditioned, which means by the time we're my age or your age, even by the time we're at 15, you've gotten, I'm assuming we're both older than 15.
You guessed my age. That's incredible.
That we've forgotten completely, about this spark inside of us. And so then we spend the next, decades maybe, building this ego, right? So I hate to pick on the personal growth world, but I'm gonna.
I think it's ripe. It's ripe for a few well-placed pot shots.
Well, let's take a couple and we'll see where it leads.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm with you. I'm ready. I brought my tomatoes.
So the personal growth world is trying to polish up who you are not.
Right.
Okay. So personal growth, self-esteem, self-confidence. I'm suggesting that this person or this self doesn't even exist like you think it does.
Right.
Okay, because that's all about the personality. Look, here's the thing. The nature of the ego, because it doesn't really exist, except as a story that you made up, right?
Yeah.
You can't find an ego, right? Like if you cut me open, you're not going to say, oh, well, there's his ego, right? I know him anywhere, right?
Right,
yeah. It's a story, literally. It's a story that I tell myself over and over again. So it's because it doesn't exist, it's fundamentally insecure. You can't make it secure.
Right.
So when I wake up in the morning with that tension, that's because I'm still operating as an ego. But the more that I see myself as who I am, as this true nature, as a pure expression of peace and love, clarity, etc., the more that begins to kind of ripple out into my life, because I'm still going to have my ego. My ego is not going to suddenly disappear.
Thank you for saying that. Let's just news flash, everyone. Right. I'm so glad you said that. We are not suggesting that you make the ego go away. And I think that's another sort of sinkhole of the personal development world when you get into the more esoteric side of it and the woo-woo and the sort of tantric expression in Bali.
The spiritual world too, you're right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's about getting rid of the ego. No, as far as I can tell, and maybe I'll let you know something else.
Yeah.
But as far as I can tell right now, you need an ego. Maybe not very much of one. That's the key, right? You just need enough to navigate in this world, right? With all the other egos. I call it like your spacesuit.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that analogy. It's making me think of the process I went through with money.
Could you say the name again?
With money.
With money, okay.
Well, specifically with my conditioning around money from birth. And mine was, sort of like, it was intense at a great literature level. It was literarily crazy. And so at first I succumbed to it and I lived within that story. And by the way, you guys, it's interesting. I hope this is relevant. It feels like it's going to be relevant. When we need community. Humans need community. And it's important to understand that because it affects everything we do at a very fundamental level, right? And so in order to join any given community, like clique, like social group, there's no external ritual. Well, sometimes there is, but by and large, like let's say you want to join crazy right-wing pro-Trump Republicans. And I'm just poking fun here. All you have to do is begin to subscribe to the narrative that bonds that group together. Yeah, that's it.
Their story.
And you don't even have to, their story. You don't even have to say it out loud. But see, there's a real sort of a spiritual trick in there because you tend not to realize that you're doing it and then you're in. And that was how it was for me with money, right? We had this narrative around money that the devil himself as a physical being was using it to destroy the world, but it was okay because the UFOs were going to come at the 11th hour, literally shoot beams at the planet.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. And then change everything right at our catastrophic brink. This is what I was indoctrinated with.
Nice.
Not bad, right?
I mean, you're going to have a story. It might make it a great one, you know?
Yeah, might as well make it a great one. So I did years and years and years of trying to sort of undo the money story. And part of that time was fruitful. Part of that time was useful and needed. But here's the catch, and here's the spiritual world in a nutshell, or an anchor of it, and the self-help world. They never tell you, there's no indication of when you're done. Right. So it's constantly keeping you in what I would call navel gazing about the problem.
Well, there's the next seminar or the next book.
There's the next right. Because and by the way, guys, I'm going to publicly state I'm sort of done with the seminar world. I'm sort of over it. But what I want people to take here is that I finally had one of those profound experiences, and it was around money, and money was like one of the biggest pieces for me, deepest, most baked in there.
For a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, as for a lot of us, and that's why I'm sharing it. I'm hoping that somebody else will hear this and go, "Oh my God." So I had changed all of the destructive behavior, but I hadn't stopped looking at my past. Do you know what I mean by that?
Oh, yeah.
Like I was holding my whole money reality in terms of how does it reflect to my past? How far am I from this? How close am I to that? And when I stopped doing that, it literally was this experience of like, oh, now I can not feel that tension. Now I can pay my bills on time. I can invest. I can like all these things. It just fucking changed. Right? Yeah. And I thought that was apropos of what you're talking about. I think
it's freedom, right?
Yeah. I think that the over analysis of the ego, and I think the overly questing to somehow completely obliterate it, both keep us there. They keep us in this place where it's like, I'm not okay because I perceive that I'm not okay, right?
Right. It's a loop.
Yeah, it's a brutal loop.
Yeah.
So,
go
ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, as far as the ego is concerned, there is a point for some of us on this journey, depending on, how our story, where our ego may have been so wounded, so damaged, that we need some work in that realm just to get to the functionality point. Okay?
Yeah.
And, that's where mainly psychotherapy and things like that can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously some of the personal growth work, whatever it may be. But as far as, the journey of life, that's a limited portion, right? There are people who, of course, who are identified with their wounds.
Yeah.
Call themselves survivors, or they call themselves this or that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to demean those people, if anybody sees it that way. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, if you want to really become who you are, you've got to step beyond that tiny little box.
Yeah.
Because, here's the weird part. And I've worked with some very traumatized people. I'm doing this, in one form or another, I've been working with people for over 30 years. And, you know, for someone to begin to get a glimpse that this true nature, this true self part of us is indestructible, which means even in the worst trauma, even in like this epidemic, even if I lose my job or my life savings or we have a depression, that part of me isn't touched.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
And so to begin to see yourself as the indestructible part of yourself, as opposed to the part that's the ego by its very nature is fragile, right? So it can get hurt. If you lose all your money, it can be like, oh crap, now what do I do? But your true nature can see everything from that perspective of freedom, like you saw with money before.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, you're always going to see the options that exist. You're always going to see possibility. You're going to see there's just a different way. So all I'm really saying is, yes, like we said a minute ago, you're going to need your ego in this world still. Yeah. But wouldn't you rather have that ego be an expression of the peace and the clarity and the love that you are, rather than an expression of the conditioning and the fear that you thought you were?
I like it. It's making me want to talk with you about and ask you about, there's this great quote from the Buddha, or at least it's attributed to the Buddha, that I really like. And one of his students, his disciples, said, "What was it like to find enlightenment? You know, what was it like to hit it?" And the quote goes, "Before enlightenment, get water from the river, chop wood. After enlightenment, get water from the river, chop wood." Right. And I always, I didn't struggle with it, but I played with that a lot. I was like, what the hell does that mean? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that you might be in a really good position to give us a snapshot of, we're not talking about sudden, spontaneous, like rapid onset enlightenment here, but what we are talking about is finding peace, right? We're talking about finding a center within you that allows you to just engage with life differently. But what life doesn't suddenly look completely different, does it?
Life will be the same.
This is
such a great question. Life, you know, and that's what this chop wood, carry water, you know, is all about. You know, it's and in Zen especially, you know, they say, you know, they use phrases like nothing special.
Yeah.
You know, that you know, one day the Zen master wakes up, you know, to enlightenment, and he goes, oh, you know, yeah, there it is, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like everything is different and yet nothing is different.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
The world, because, you know, it's like when you begin to recognize that you are this spiritual being, that you are the spiritual, not the physical. The physical is a projection of the spiritual. You know, I tell my clients, you know, still obey the laws of gravity.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Don't stop at stop signs.
Yeah.
After you've seen this.
Yeah.
But what is the advantage of it, right? What's the point of any of this? Because your relationship to all of it changes.
That's the thing. Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's the only thing you ever can have. One other thing is, you know, I joke, I say I'm a Jewish kid from Long Island that likes to quote Jesus. But it's because, from my perspective, you know, I don't come, you know, because of my conditioning and my upbringing, I don't necessarily come from the Son of God perspective, but I believe that Jesus came here to share very much what I'm talking about here, okay? In that what he saw was his true nature. He saw that he was love, and that was his message. And so one of the quotes from Jesus that I love is to be in the world, but not of the world.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to be in this world. That's not avoidable.
Right.
But when we realize, and when I say realize, I want to be clear. I don't mean intellectually understand.
Yeah.
I mean deeply see, like there's a shift.
Yeah.
That we are not of this world. And like I say, the relationship changes.
Yeah. So let's go out into the stratosphere for a minute. You want to? Is it then? I subscribe to the theory plus or minus a deity, plus or minus a god of any kind, from whatever discipline you prefer. I subscribe to the it's more like a mathematical, you tell me what it is. If the universe started, first of all, let me say, for anyone out there listening, I'm perfectly comfortable with the idea that some sort of a God figure did the Big Bang. I'm perfectly comfortable with that idea myself. So I don't think it's science or God. I've never been able to think that I've never been able to see why they couldn't go hand in hand.
Right.
That having been said, if the Big Bang started and there were 3 elements released out into the universe, to the void, and those 3 elements moving at the speed of light created all this ultimately, and if it's what we see in the universe is ever increasing complexity and interdependence, and we are the most sophisticated example of that we know, that we've seen yet. That's not hubris, right? That's just like, there's nothing that we can perceive that's more. Okay, so you're with me there.
Oh, yeah.
If we are then like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young said, we are. I don't remember how they put it, but they said something that meant we are the universe experiencing itself subjectively.
Okay.
Through the lens of ego, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways of saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, but if that's the case, then and if the sort of point is to get back to love and to get back to this pureness, what is your take on the whole sort of existence of duality? Like is that the next thing that we as just the force of creativity made manifest are like, just what's your 2 cents on that? Because this is where I get really.
You're opening a big can of worms here.
Yeah, but, I know.
I mean, and there's a lot of different, because I've studied all these traditions, and so I think, so for example, if you look at Taoism, right?
Yeah.
Taoism. It starts from the all, the void.
Yeah.
I can't remember the word for the oneness, but then it splits into 2, which is the Tao. Now you've got yin and yang, and then everything kind of becomes something from yin and yang. So it comes from the 2 to the 10,000 things.
Yeah, yeah.
So duality, by the way, Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah, totally.
What do? They live in the Garden of Eden. That is the metaphor for oneness. Okay, they are still, they don't perceive any separation from God. No duality. Yeah. You see? And then what do? They eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, duality.
Right.
And the story, of course, is that God was angry and threw them out of the garden, and now they experience duality. They experience separateness. Duality is the separateness, is the function of the ego. Sometimes I call the ego the separate self. In other words, the ego, it built itself as a separate entity to try and protect itself. So you come into the world as a baby, you have no sense of separateness. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't look at your mom like she's out there. You are pure consciousness at this point, is how I would say it.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't have any sense of a me. You're just consciousness in the world, and everything is going on, and you're just like, everything is happening. But then, we can make up all kinds of stories, but let's just say you begin getting the message over and over and over again that everyone in the world seems to be separate. They seem to think they're separate. They have their own separate names.
Right.
They begin calling you by your name.
Yeah.
They call you by one name and your sister by a different name. They say, those are your sister's toys. You can have you know what I mean? So the message goes on and on and on. You go to school and there's your desk with your name on it. And somewhere along the way, you begin to get the message is conditioned into you that you are a separate person. And the birth of duality is born with the birth of your identity.
Yeah.
If there's no me, there's no duality. Okay? Sometimes and this also comes in the form of language, by the way. That's the other way that it happens. If I can't name anything, the moment I start naming things, they become separate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Language, by the way, is another, like, just in and of itself is something that blows my mind. Like, language spontaneously cropped up everywhere at about the same time. And from the different sides of the planet, the ways that people manifested it are completely unrecognizable to each other.
Right.
And yet it looks like it was an inevitability.
It's required. I mean, if we're going to be an ego and we're going to be separate, then we need to have some way to communicate, right?
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, I have to assume, like, I don't know. I can't show any evidence that there is a plan or there isn't a plan.
Sure.
I operate from the general assumption that this had to be part of the plan, because this whole thing about, like, every child, for example, falls into this same trap, right? Every child is born as love, as pure bliss and oneness, right?
Yeah.
And then they fall into the same trap of becoming a separate self, and then going through decades of suffering. And some of us, at some point, will wake up to this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty universal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's got to be part of the design. I don't know why else it would happen every time.
That's what I think too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It just to put it in a simple, easily palatable way, I think it's part of the process. I think that it's almost like first we had to reach a certain level of complexity and ability to function in the physical realm. And I'm not saying we're stopping evolving there, but we did it. We did it to the point that we have shaped our reality to fit our physical limitations.
Okay.
Right. I mean, you and I are both cyborgs. We wear glasses. Right. Think about it, we have shaped our reality to fit the best way to interact with the world as human beings, with 10 fingers and 10 toes and roughly 5 to 6 feet tall and all that stuff. It's really a trip. And so the next thing I think is that we are getting more complex and interdependent in the awareness of the energetic realms, the spiritual realms, the non-physical realms. And I think that's what I see happening now. It's really, like, I was just talking about this with someone else, just in terms of social media's impact on the progression of, I guess you call it like the collective consciousness. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure here's my sort of my example. I'm pretty sure that when I was in my early 20s, there weren't a whole wave of super bright, super sharp, super successful, super conscious 20-somethings the way there are now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So the every generation has done a little bit to push the collective consciousness forward, raise our vibe, so to speak. And from that, social media popped out. And it is an easy scapegoat, isn't it? People love to say all the evils and the woes of social media. But at the same time, I think with all of us now being connected, we've just shifted into a higher gear with the raising of the collective consciousness because of our ability to connect with other people all over the world.
And of course, there'll be some growing pains with that.
Of course, because duality. Right. I mean, it's just like it there's going to be growing pains, and not everything is like purely good, which is, I think, something that people tend to want to cling to. This idea that some things are purely good and some things are purely not. And it's far more of a bell curve distribution, right? I mean, it's like, so thank you for shooting out into the stratosphere with me. I think we would be remiss if we didn't give people some simple takeaways now that we've just been like, let's just tear apart the fabric of reality for 20 minutes.
Yeah. In other words, like, and that's the question, right? The people, it's like, how do you sort of actualize this in your life? You know?
Yeah, right. Now that, thanks, Manny. Thanks, Fred. Now what can I do with this?
Well, it's tricky, but it's not tricky. I don't know how to say it, because the essence of it is that, the ego is always looking for a tip or a trick, because it's still in that personal growth mode that we talked about before.
Yeah.
So that isn't going to work here. It's just that simple. What we create in this work, my work, is what I call a glimpse. Now, a glimpse is something sort of non-linear. It's not something that, like, you get just because you say, "Oh, I'm just going to have a glimpse." It's something you look in the direction of, and I'll try and give an example of this in a second, but let me just explain it. You look in the direction of your true nature. Mm-hmm. You look towards who you really are, and in doing so, for a moment, you might catch like almost out of the corner of your eye. Because here's a really important point: the mind, which is a tool of the ego, can't go to true nature. Okay, why is that? It's simple. The finite, which is the mind and the ego, cannot understand the infinite, which is who you are.
So we can't look directly at it?
Right.
Okay.
I can't, like, this is why people have read the books, you've read scripture, you've read Eckhart Tolle, whatever, and somehow, wow, he seemed like he had it, right? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
Why didn't that? Because your mind is trying to grasp it. That's what the ego does. The ego grasps. The ego is constantly seeking and grasping. Mm-hmm. Now, the nature of the ego, just to be clear, is to seek. The nature of the ego is not to find. Okay. So if you're seeking, your ego's like, okay, we're on this, right?
Yeah.
But it's never going to find it. So a glimpse is like, for a moment when you let yourself relax. Even now, like, sometimes, the best way, another quote actually from Jesus that I like to share is, when two or more are gathered in my name, there shall I be in their midst. Because there's something to say that when people gather, two or more, just like this, in my name, to me, is just in the spirit of this inquiry.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily in Jesus' name. It means in the spirit of love, in the spirit of who we really are.
Yeah.
There shall I be in their midst just means that somehow that space becomes amplified.
Yeah.
Naturally. So this is best done, I'll just say, in that context. This is why I still work one-on-one with clients, right? It's not like because I'm going to give them a whole bunch of content, but because when we sit together and we look together and I hold that space for them of who they are. Like, I don't see them as an ego. I see them as who they are.
Yeah.
We rise together, And so there's something really powerful in that space that's palpable. People can feel the stillness in the space. And in that space, and you can even begin to notice it now, because as we begin to talk and as we begin to point towards it, I know I can feel the whole space, like, it becomes a little more still.
Yeah.
Now you feel that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I probably, if there are people listening right now or later, they may feel the same thing. So that space is literally like a glimpse of true nature. Your mind can't go there, but you catch a glimpse, and then that glimpse ripples into the day-to-day ego kind of experience.
Yeah, I like the phrase ripples into. It's indirect, it's soft, it's not, you couldn't, like, take a snapshot of it and circle where it was happening, kind of a thing.
Exactly. You can't put it in a book.
Yeah.
It's not a tip.
Right.
And the other thing I'll add about that, what was it? Oh, this is it. That the cool thing about this, I say to my clients all the time, I might get lucky. Like, if we talk for an hour, I might say one or two things that actually resonate for you.
Yeah.
But if we sit in this space together long enough and we talk about whatever we talk about, I know the work is getting done. Because literally in this moment, as we sit in this stillness, your brain is rewiring itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is changing. It is reorganizing itself to align more efficiently with who you are.
Yeah. Is it accurate to say, let's see, the word recalibration keeps coming up. I keep wanting to say recalibration.
Sure.
It's like opening up the channel for this. And I say vibration, I mean it literally, guys.
Yeah, vibration or frequency are good words.
Yeah, yeah. So for them listening, though, I don't mean it like your vibe, in the misconstrued way. I mean it literally. So it's interesting now that we're at this point in the conversation. It's like we glance at it, we turn toward it. We don't glance at it, we turn toward it, and in doing that, we can open up the place for this new frequency to come in. And as it comes in, we can slowly begin to attenuate for it, but it's not happening up here.
Right. Well, in the mind, you mean?
Yeah, in the mind, I mean.
Right.
So to me, this is an obvious segue. What are your thoughts on powerful psychedelic experiences?
Ah.
Not the mimby pimby ones, right? Not that we get like the
Yeah.
the big ones.
Well, I could tell you only from my limited experience. How's that? Meaning, I have had one experience with ayahuasca.
Which those are all, by the way, those are all heavy hitters, guys.
Yeah. So that's that. Yeah. I was very fortunate because I was invited. It was very spontaneous, and I felt right, and I said yes. And it was done in like deep ceremony, which is the way I think it should be done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I won't get into all of it, but it was in pitch black. It was all night. There was chanting and very, very traditional ceremony.
Yeah.
And for me, it was very powerful. I mean, I had an experience of literally going to what felt to me like what I call the source of thought, right? Because we are this oneness. So we, as true nature, there is no thought. There is just pure love, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
But then, so that's like the ocean. Right. But then there's like a ripple on the ocean, right? The ripple is a thought. It's something, some frequency, some vibration in this pure ocean becomes a thought form. And then that thought form can become a thing in the physical world. Yeah. This is how it ripples down from pure formlessness into form. So I felt like I had this glimpse of like the source where like I could see thoughts. And I could trace their journey all the way in from formlessness into form over and over again. It seemed like I watched 10,000 thoughts over the course of the night.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. The one with psychedelics.
That works for me. I had from I think 16 to 19. So one of the things that I sort of like, I guess grateful or not grateful is maybe not the right binary system to talk about my past in. I recognize that everything that I lived through formed who I am, and I like who I am. So whatever that means, right? But one of the things was that growing up in a hippie cult, psychedelics were perfectly acceptable. In fact, my older godbrother, some of the people there were very, very careless and spaced out, and like you have to be a member of a cult. My older godbrother, his mother left out. They don't even do this anymore, but sugar cube, like LSD and sugar cubes, and that was always like anything that you got in a dropper and had to put on something was very, very strong. And so then it shifted over to most of the psychedelics were sold as, on paper that had been dipped and blah, blah, blah. When I say sugar cube, it carries with it an inference that this was really strong stuff. Well, she just left some out on the end table. And my older godbrother, when he was 10, he ate a sugar cube. So that's how careless they were with drugs, right? But that having been said, I had a very tight-knit group of friends in my teens, and we went through a period of about 3 years where every single weekend together, we took these like massively powerful, at least we hoped they would be, psychedelic trips. Oftentimes staying up from Friday to Sunday, just in this other dimension. And it was fascinating because I watched other people. It was very popular in the city I lived in with the young drug enthusiast crowd, to do psychedelics. And other people were doing things like one guy in a tribute to all that is cliche. He thought he could fly and jumped off his roof. I'm like, what a poser. Yeah. Like, come on, man. How could you possibly know or forget that you can't, anyway. We, on the other hand, for us, it was this very profound thing. It was this I will look back on it now all these years later and I'll call it sacred. Yeah. I would never use that word at the time. It didn't make any sense to me, but, and then I've spent, the intervening years between then and now kind of trying to articulate, like, it had massive lasting positive effects for me. That's what I'm trying to get at. Mm-hmm. And I think that, like, I really, just in talking to you here, was able to maybe bring some of them to the level of words with this idea that sort of, I think we opened up the possibility for new frequencies to come in, and when they came in, we attenuated to them. I think that's a pretty fair way of expressing what happened. And all through the rest of my life, I've known that I was sort of in some way different than most people, Right. And I think a lot of it had to do with that experience. I'm glad that bringing that up, you didn't go, I don't know, man, you're on your own.
No, I think that's, lots of, indigenous type cultures have used psychedelics, and it's never been a really like major part of my path, but I get it. I see where the people can find some kind of value or opening in that. And like anything else, I think it's probably a tool that at some point you probably can put aside. Yeah. Lest you become too dependent on it. Yeah. And of course, I don't know what the long-term neurological effects are of doing these things over and over again, as an adult. There's your case study.
Maybe you're talking to him.
Maybe so. I just don't know,
Yeah, no, me either. I don't. And I joke about how many of my friends sort of weren't able to handle it, but it's true. Like it really took some people to some weird places in my peer group. One of my best friends jokes that psychedelics, LSD in particular, that's the only drug that quits you when it's good and ready. So listen, this has been fantastic, Fred. What do you want people to know during this time that's really sort of like central to what you do and what you help people with, that maybe they can take away? I think we've probably created some substantial, opportunities for people to shift their perspective just in this sort of free form chat. But I'd like you to take us home. Yeah.
There's a couple of thoughts that come to my mind, and maybe I'll start with this really quick if I can, if I may. Like, I'm not sure how people want to reach out to me or not, but I've always made it a policy that if somebody needs further understanding, like if I said something on this call for someone that resonates, but they're like, how does that apply to my situation? Yeah. Reach out, right? I am more than happy to spend some time. And by time, I mean an hour, sitting with you, talking with you, hopefully with better lighting, where we can, sort this out a little bit for your own self. Not for money. I just want to help people because I think it is critical that we understand this. And so if we want to put my phone number or whatever out there, that's fine with me.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I think maybe what we'll do is we'll send you over a copy of the video, and you can just type in, whatever you want in the headline.
Comment box or so. Oh, okay.
But I love that. I love that because it's, for your work, there is no sort of cookie cutter takeaway.
Well,
You know
I'm
what I mean?
going to share a couple of things, but you're right. They're generic in that the experience occurs. It's experience. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. You know.
Yeah.
And everyone is going to hear what we've talked about here at different levels.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And I respect that. And I'm not looking, because this isn't about shifting your mind. It's about going beyond the mind.
Yeah.
And so it's tough in this format. I mean, I'm well aware of the limitation, but so that's
Sure.
I'll share a couple of quick ones. One is, people say a lot of things like "this too shall pass," and from the perspective of really, if you want to really wake up to who you are, we stop looking to get past anything. Okay? This experience in this moment, what you're feeling right now, like, I'm not a positive thinking guy. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to change your thoughts. If you're afraid right now in this moment, then rather than looking out, my fingers again, if you're looking out there, you can't figure that out. Okay? To like try and blame the fear on the circumstances, on the economy or something.
Yeah.
I tell people, turn around, face the fear, be exactly who you are with the fear. And by sitting, holding still in that fear, you're going to see it for what it is. It's like you're saying, right? It's a thought form. It's a frequency.
Yeah.
What I will call, and this is another conversation for another time, but we call it love in disguise. We are love. Everything is love in disguise. So maybe that's a good thing for people to see. Don't, like even the stuff that looks so terrifying on the outside, sit with it, face it.
Yeah.
Sit with it until you can see it as love. And if you need help with that, that's why I'm here.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Remember yesterday when we were texting and I said, I don't want to know about people beforehand. I like to just flip the switch and let it go. This is why, man.
This was fun.
This is why. Yeah. Thank you so much, my friend. That was super, super enjoyable for me. And I hope that some people got something out of it as well. If you want anything in terms of, you're going to put your number out there anyway. I think that's it, man. I think this is a great stopping point. Feels complete, feels solid. I appreciate your time very, very much. And then if you have nothing else, we'll call it here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good, man.
All right, man.
Thank you.
It's taken forever to end. As far as I know, we're still live. All right, I'm just